You've heard of wise Odin, mighty Thor, and sly Loki. But did you know there's an obscure Norse god who holds the very essence of creation in his words? His name is Bragi, and this god is special in a way that none of the Norse gods, not even the greatest of all, Odin, can claim. Stick around to the end and you'll understand why. So why haven't you heard of him? Well, odds are you have. Just not necessarily in a way you'd recognize, but rather in the stories he told about others. Traditionally, Bragi is the Bard or skald of Valhalla, and patron god of the human skalds. It is he who sings the songs of heroes and greets the fallen as they arrive in Odin's hall. As much as the Old Norse venerated the deeds of the brave and the might of warriors, those virtues were as smoke on the wind without the skalds to sing their songs and tell their stories, and Bragi was the god of storytellers. In some accounts, he even had runes carved on his tongue, symbolizing the power of his voice. Bragi didn't simply tell the stories of the heroes of Valhalla, he shaped those stories, molded and refined them. He strengthened and proclaimed the fortunes and reputations of the warriors of Valhalla with his songs and his poems. As the patron of skalds, the bards and poets of the human world, Bragi's influence in turn enhanced or destroyed the reputations of mortal warriors. Reputation in history itself, what was real and what was not, what was believed and remembered and what was forgotten, depended entirely on the skalds. If two warriors were alike in strength, bravery, and accomplishment, it didn't always matter. If the skald who sang and told those deeds was skillful and eloquent, one warrior's reputation might be enhanced and solidified. If, however, another warrior managed to offend or otherwise get on their skald's bad side, then their great deeds would count for little once the skald was done with them. A hero's worth wasn't always measured simply by their actual deeds, but rather the perception of those deeds by those around him, and that perception was created almost entirely by the songs and stories told about them by the skalds. The skalds shape reality, influence reality, and even created reality, or at least what was perceived as real, through the power of their poems and storytelling. The stories they preserved are the ones that survived, and only what survives becomes history, what the culture remembers. If you doubt that, perhaps another story might help convince you. In 9th century Norway, a man named Bragi Boddason was born. His name, which was not common but not unique, was probably derived from Bragar, which was the Norse word for poetry and eloquence. He was descended from a family of skalds and married the daughter of another famous line of skalds. He is the oldest Norse poet who has any poetry attributed to him surviving to the present day. So, what has an old skald of Norway to do with anything? Simple. He is the god Bragi, the Bard of Valhalla. True, he didn't start that way. Unlike the other gods, he started as a mortal man, albeit before his death he had the reputation of being the greatest skald of all. So much so that later chroniclers and writers, including the great 13th century Icelandic writer Snorri Sturluson, in his Prose Edda, named him as the Bard of Valhalla, as in his opinion there was no way that Odin would not have wanted him to serve as the skald of his hall and welcome the newly fallen heroes there. Before those later skalds, as that was the role they played, were finished with him, Bragi was not only a god but a son of Odin himself, as the Prose Edda assumes. Now then, here's the important, not to mention fun part. All available evidence shows that Bragi was never considered a god while the Old Norse religion was still being practiced in its original form and in its original prominence. It also wasn't, so far as anyone has been able to determine, in the oral tradition on which Snorri Sturluson based his account. You'll find no mention of a god Bragi in runic inscriptions or anything else that survives from that time. All such texts mentioning Bragi as the Bard of Valhalla date hundreds of years later, from the 12th to 13th centuries onward, and written by later Christian writers. This included Snorri Sturluson himself, who added his own interpretations based on his current beliefs and attitudes. The new religion had long since taken hold, and the Old Norse pantheon was only a ghost of itself by Snorri's time, if even that. This was long before its modern recreation and revival. Most of what we understand today about the original Norse religion is through the lens of these later Christian sources, and they weren't exactly unbiased. In short, medieval Christian writers and storytellers long after Bragi's day turned a mortal man into an ancient Norse god who was the greatest storyteller of all. A god who, by all evidence, didn't exist until long after the Viking Age had ended. And how's that for shaping reality?